Congratulations, all of you have successfully completed the first portion of our Focus on Learning Action Plan and are ready to move on to the second portion, which is focusing on feedback. Just as a reminder, our action plan can be found in our Schoology course. I believe that every one of you is a member, but if for some reason you're not, be sure to join. We got a little catch-up work, some pet postings to do for success criteria, and to stay on track with feedback. Our learning intentions for this portion will be, I will understand how feedback and tools support student ownership of learning. I can determine which tool is most appropriate for my students, and I can teach my students how to use the tools to give and receive feedback. This is a graphic that we are all pretty well familiar with. That very left side is what we focused on for the first month, that learning intentions, success criteria, and learner experiences. Now we're right there in the center, that feedback, self, student to student, and teacher to student. As we work to develop assessment-capable learners, ACL, we are growing the belief in their ability to be successful in mastering the learning intentions that we establish with them. Students who have a strong sense of self-efficacy have an I can attitude. There are several things that we can observe in students who have a high sense of self-efficacy. They are intrinsically motivated. That means that their motivations come internally, they come from themselves, and they put a high amount of effort into their work. They don't stay with only the easy tasks. They challenge themselves with difficult tasks because they understand the support structures available to them. They are persistent in the face of adversity, work through the productive struggle, and show grit. They are resilient and don't get discouraged by failure. They see mistakes as opportunities to grow and learn. When you talk to students who have a high self-efficacy, they are confident in their ability to achieve their goals. This is in contrast to the student who does not have high self-efficacy, who might say things like, I can't, or may be specific to an academic area like, I'm not a good reader, or I'm not good at math. So those key things, those key terms that we're looking for are for students to challenge themselves, be persistent, be resilient, and be confident. And of course, here at Malala, we know that those are characteristics that we are trying to build in our students. And we do that through mastery moments. Those are opportunities for students to be successful and feel that. Modeling success, making them feel safe, and of course, just as we're covering in this particular unit, feedback. So empowering them to analyze, give themselves feedback, give each other feedback, and be confident to give feedback with you, their teacher. As you're thinking about this, what are some ways you might see evidence from students with high self-efficacy? Kind of think about that for a minute. What would you look for? What type of work product, what type of terms, what kind of statements, what kind of questions do you think you would see in students that were in your classroom that have those characteristics? When we talk about feedback, you've already hit on some of the big ideas just from your experiences. So this is all with the idea that the feedback process is intended to close gaps and help learners achieve mastery of learning goals. We want it to be actionable so that the learner knows what's next and can walk away from the feedback process understanding what they need to do next to continue to grow. The feedback needs to be specific, meaning that it aligns with learning intentions, success criteria, and the learner experience. As we develop effective feedback, we want to make sure the feedback is timely, meaning it's provided in a time frame that allows students to make adjustments to their work as quickly as possible. The more time exists between work that is created and feedback is given, the less meaning the feedback will have. And we kind of focus on this graphic, the mast. opportunities, you know that this is effective feedback. There are a couple of videos at this point that are available for you to watch. And so we're going to go ahead and take a second to watch these. As you do, I'd like you to get out a sticky note and write 3 things that interest you, 2 wonderings you have, and 1 thing you might be able to take back or utilize in your classroom.
My goal in providing students feedback starts with my learning intention. I need to be very clear with what I expect them to do throughout the lesson, as well as how and the outcome of the lesson. So by me understanding what it is that students are supposed to be doing during the lesson, I'm able to then check in with each group of students or independently and provide them feedback based on what that learning intention is. And so that truly allows a partnership to happen between the student and the teacher around one common goal. Mine being that I need you to understand how to answer this question, this learning intention mind map. And they're coming in, their side of the partnership is, okay, I need you to give me the skills to understand how to answer this question. You're working hard?
Yes. With the people around.
So let's start that sentence over.
In my opinion, the theme is that we should have labor.
So working hard. I want you to use that instead. Start the sentence over. I love how you're not giving up. Go ahead.
I think that the theme is that people should work hard around the people that they know.
That's juicy.
I have something to add.
Go ahead, sir.
The message, the theme, what I saw the theme was that you need to behave in order to get rewarded for something.
I think these are all great, and I love how you're using your academic language and you're adding to each other. So that means you're listening. Now, the only thing I'm going to ask for you to get a, what am I going to ask for? You're almost there. You're using the academic language, now you just need your evidence. I can't wait to come back. I'll see you in 2 more minutes. There's really a nice balance that's struck with students when they come to me, because I'm able to provide those skills and strategies and feedback. And then they're able to internalize, okay, this is what I need for me to eventually feel successful at the end of this lesson. So it's a really nice balance that I think that's struck in the classroom when it's centered around a common goal and that common learning intention.
So when it comes to prepping students for giving quality feedback, it is an ongoing process that we must revisit time and time again. We talk about good feedback needs to be actionable, so it needs to be something that they can, or the student can respond to. So it's not good enough just to say good job, for example. We use that as our counterexample of good feedback. The worst feedback you could ever give is the student saying good job. And the reason why is because it might make you feel good, but you can't necessarily improve. So sometimes they question, so what do you do if you agree with everything that you're reading? Should you just say, good job, or I agree? And I try to encourage them, if you agree, say why. Paraphrase the other student's thinking, paraphrase their work. Try to put it in your own words, because then the student who's receiving the feedback can read your paraphrasing and say, whoa, that's actually not what I meant. So maybe you think that this is a good job, and now that I'm reading your rephrasing, that's not how I intended this to come across. Or they can see it in exactly what they meant in a different light and go, yeah, this is what I meant. I am being clear. Ultimately going to provide feedback against these success criteria. Can the person who you're providing feedback to solve absolute value equations and explain their thinking? That's our first success criteria, in line with which one is it? Parts, I think it's question 1 and 2 on this one. And then the second one, can they graph absolute value functions? Okay, so this is the criteria that you're grading them against, and that they're going to be grading you against. So remember, excellent feedback is actionable feedback. So what's the worst possible feedback we can give? Well, that's true, no feedback. What's the second worst feedback that we can give? Good job. Because good job, while it might make them feel good, there might not be anything that they can do with it. So if you do want to praise their effort and their work, that's excellent. But please do so with something about why it is that you're praising. What part of it do you agree with? What part of it is making sense?
Well, there are different reasons why I give feedback. Feedback needs to be specific, so a lot of times I will give feedback based on the strategy that they're using. I want them to think about the thinking. So I might say, well, have you thought about this, or have you tried this? I might ask questions to get them to reflect, to give them feedback towards the product. So what do they need to do? What feedback is specific to the task? But a lot of times I will give feedback that's specific to the thinking, so that they can take that feedback and apply it to any task that we do in our classroom. For example, one of the things that my students tend to do in math is they want to jump straight to the numbers. And they want to use an algorithm. And so when they get stuck with the numbers and they're not quite sure what the concept is asking of them, I always will ask them, well, have you thought about using a model? What model might help you solve this problem? And so I get them to think about the specific strategies and the thinking that goes involved in solving that problem, and get them to think about the process. What do I need to do in order to solve this problem? Kind of direct them to a different step.
Thinking about allowing students to provide feedback to one another. And we do this continuously, and in the beginning of the year, again, taking it slow and ensuring that they're not rushing through. But what we found is if we take the time in the beginning and really provide them with the scaffolds, the strategies, whether it's we have language frames set up for peer reviews, and those language frames even have guiding questions on something that they can look for, or on the success criteria. The success criteria today had suggestions. Okay, maybe this scholar could use more support on this, giving them an idea on what kind of feedback they can give. So what we're really trying to encourage, and what we've seen with students being able to really master that idea of giving each other feedback, and we say specific, encouraging, and constructive. And so the students, and we've come up with this quick phrase that helps us reminder it only takes a sec to be specific, encouraging, and constructive, because we don't want to be overly nice and say everything's great, because then we're really hindering that learning process. We're really stunting the growth. We don't want to be super critical and where someone feels like they're shutting down.
We're trying to match the success criteria and the feedback we might give someone if they were at that success criteria.
Yes, and I'm going to draw a little image here. So basically, if we were to have our statements lined up, our new statements for the suggestions, for the recommendations, we would line them up right next to them. And we are definitely looking forward to this college level conversation and justifying why would this recommendation match or fit a student who has found themselves at this level of success. Okay, so thinking about a statement that's giving you a recommendation. What could they do next? What could they possibly work on? What support might they need? Why does that match that level of success? Just checking. Okay, 5 minutes. We encourage you to spread those new statements out so that everyone gets a chance to look at one, and then you can discuss where would this align? What kind of recommendation does this fit? Or what kind of success criteria does this fit? You may begin.
Has everything that they need to pass.
Yeah. Things like that.
It's like some of the words that they use is like identify, elaborate, and detail. Which leads me to believe that it's the first one.
Yeah, it sounds a lot more scholarly. Non-passive grade.
So what do you guys got? What are you thinking?
So I think the first one is like it has a lot more scholarly words, so we think that's the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so why did you choose, because you said this is the most scholarly, why did you choose these in this particular order?
These two are like not passing grades or something if they were getting graded. And this one is probably like an A, and this one's like a B, this one's a C.
Okay, so you kind of assigned a grade to each one, right? Whether or not they met the success criteria. So you're saying that these two, the scholar, if their response was like this, they wouldn't have met that success criteria?
This may have been like a C minus, and this would have been a complete.
An incomplete and C minus. Okay.
When we prepare students to give helpful feedback to each other, it takes a long time. It takes a lot of practice. And luckily I work with a colleague who is really, really good at this and has developed some great sentence frames around that help facilitate that conversation. So as you're practicing it, it's always a nice thing to go back and remind students, hey, let's look at our sentence frames and how we give feedback. And so as the students progress through and you practice it, they become better, but it really has to be intentional. As a science teacher, that wasn't something I came out of my credential program with and that I didn't use for a long time. And in the past year or so, year and a half, I've been working with my co-teacher to do that. And so really being intentional about that this is what we're practicing, this is how we're going to do it, and taking your time, being patient. And if the students aren't using the correct language, aren't providing that feedback appropriately, then taking a step back, reminding them of what it should look like, and giving them another chance to try it. So really, it's that practice, giving feedback to the students about how they're getting feedback is really important.
Teaching feedback to students. As you are starting to teach these ideas and protocols to students, there are some great guiding questions that you can ask yourself to see how they are ready to use feedback. We want to make sure that you are using those high leverage activities and processes to really deepen students' understanding and help them build that ownership of learning. Let's take a moment and look at these questions. As you read, pick the question you think might be the most critical. Have you modeled the success criteria for students? Do students have access to success criteria, examples, exemplars, so they can use them independently? Have you asked students to self-assess prior to peer feedback? How can tools help you be metacognitive? Have you provided students with words and modeling to effectively give or receive constructive feedback? Have you provided a structure for providing the feedback? Tag, glow, grow, learning ladder? Have you ever given them opportunities to practice giving and receiving feedback?
As we wrap up today, I just want to remind you that there's a post-assessment in the success criteria portion of our training. And so I would like you to complete that before moving on to feedback. But as we look forward, starting next week, there will be multiple opportunities, all found in the Schoology folder, in the form of media albums to upload artifacts, giving evidence of the great work you're doing in your classrooms. In week 5, the evidence will pertain to you modeling and introducing feedback to your students. In week 6, the evidence will be related to student to teacher feedback. In week 7, you'll have the opportunity to provide evidence of peer-to-peer feedback, and that can be done all the way through that PD day. And finally, in the week 8 of this portion of our training, you'll be providing evidence that your students are engaging in self-feedback in some form. So again, if you need any extra supports or if this training isn't enough, reach out, let me know. I'm happy to support you. We have wonderful people on campus that know a lot about feedback, so there's lots of opportunities to support.